In a sprawling NATO logistics base in Eastern Europe, a quiet civilian contractor was about to deliver a routine shipment. What started as a simple walk to the secure hangars took a shocking turn when they came face to face with a security scanner that would expose everything. Elena Voss wasn't your typical supply clerk. For 8 years, she had spent her life invisible among soldiers and mechanics, known for her uncanny ability to fix problems no one else could solve. When she encountered the hangar checkpoint and submitted to a standard security scan, she had no idea she was walking into a revelation that would shatter her carefully constructed anonymity. Elena watched calmly as the screen displayed Omega Black, a clearance level that would lead to questions she'd spent nearly a decade avoiding. What began as a mislabeled shipping manifest would become a deadly game of cat and louse. The base would never be the same after discovering that their most unremarkable contractor was actually their most dangerous asset. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena Voss moved through the sprawling NATO logistics base like water through a sieve, present but unnoticed, essential but invisible. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Eastern European compound as she navigated between supply depots and maintenance bays, her worn tablet clutched against a chest that bore no insignia, no rank, no indication of anything beyond civilian contractor status. At 34, she had perfected the art of occupying space without claiming it. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her clothes were the universal uniform of the overlooked. Khaki pants, navy polo shirt, steel-toed boots that had seen better years. To the soldiers bustling around her, she was just another cog in the vast machinery of military logistics, someone who handled the paperwork so they could handle the weapons. "Voss," Sergeant Yara Moreno's voice cut across the motor pool like a blade. "Where the hell are my transmission filters?" Elena didn't look up from her tablet as she approached the maintenance bay. Shipment 47 Alpha was rerouted through Prague, ETA 1400 hours. "That's what you said yesterday." "Yesterday I said 1300 hours. Today it's 1400 hours. Air traffic delays." Yara's jaw tightened, but she couldn't argue with facts. Elena had learned long ago that the best way to deflect attention was to be absolutely, unquestionably competent at the things that mattered to other people. Missing parts mattered to sergeants. Proper documentation mattered to officers. Staying invisible mattered to Elena. "You know what your problem is, Voss?" called out Corporal Martinez from underneath the hood of a disabled transport. "You never get excited about anything. Don't you have feelings?" Elena's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. "I save them for special occasions." The truth was, Elena noticed everything. She noticed that Martinez had been working on the same electrical problem for 3 days because he kept forgetting to check the ground wire. She noticed that the supply manifests showed a pattern of missing items that couldn't be explained by normal theft or misplacement. She noticed that Private First Class Devon Cross spent more time at the coffee station than at his desk, but somehow always knew which officers were meeting behind closed doors. Speaking of Cross, the young soldier was approaching now with the eager expression of someone who had gossip to share. "Hey, Elena," Devon said, deliberately using her first name in a way that would have earned him a reprimand from most contractors. "You hear about the stuff happening over at Hangar 7? "I don't hear about anything, Devon. I process shipping manifests." "Come on, everybody's talking about it. Big security meeting yesterday. Some kind of special equipment came in. Real hush-hush stuff. Even Sergeant Williams got kicked out, and he's got level 3 clearance." Elena's fingers continued their steady dance on the tablet screen, but something behind her eyes sharpened. "Equipment from where?" "That's just it. Nobody knows. The delivery wasn't on any of the regular schedules, just showed up with priority authorization and got shuttled straight into the secure bay." Before Elena could respond, a sharp crack echoed from the junction box mounted on the bay's support column.
Sparks showered down as the lights flickered and died. "God damn it," Yara muttered. "Martinez, kill the power to Bay 3. Elena was already moving, her tablet forgotten on a nearby workbench. She approached the smoking junction box with the calm confidence of someone who understood exactly what she was looking at. The wiring was standard NATO spec, but the installation was sloppy, probably done by whoever had built this temporary facility. A ground fault had created a feedback loop that would keep tripping until someone rewired the entire circuit.
While the soldiers fumbled for flashlights and radioed for an electrician, Elena quietly opened the junction box cover with a multi-tool from her pocket. Her movements were swift and sure, the muscle memory of someone who had done this type of work many times before. In less than 90 seconds, she had rerouted the problem circuit and restored power to the bay. The lights came back on to find Elena already walking away, her tablet back in her hands as though nothing had happened. "Did she just—" Martinez started. "Fix our electrical problem?" Yara finished. "Yeah, she did." The mislabeled shipment arrived at 13:47 hours, just as Elena was finishing her lunch. A single crate, roughly the size of a footlocker, marked for Hangar 7 instead of the standard supply depot. According to her manifest, it contained replacement hydraulic seals, routine maintenance supplies, that someone had marked with the wrong destination code. Elena could have simply corrected the paperwork and had the crate rerouted, should have, according to protocol. But something about Devon's earlier comments had lodged itself in her mind like a splinter. A shipment that wasn't on the schedules, priority authorization with no paper trail. She loaded the crate onto a hand truck and made her way across the base toward the secure hangars. Hangar 7 sat at the far end of the compound, surrounded by a double fence and monitored by cameras that tracked her approach from 3 different angles. Elena had been on this base for 8 months and had never once needed to visit the secure facilities. She preferred it that way. The guard at the checkpoint was young, maybe 22, with the nervous energy of someone trying to project authority he didn't quite feel. His name tape read Brooks. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification." Elena handed over her contractor badge without comment. Brooks swiped it through his scanner, then frowned at the display. "This is showing some kind of error. Let me try again." The second scan produced the same result. Brooks called over his shoulder to the guard shack. "Hey, Morrison, can you come take a look at this?" Morrison was older, more experienced, and immediately suspicious of anything that didn't follow normal procedure. He took Elena's badge and ran it through a different scanner, one that was hardwired to the base's central security system. The screen that had shown Contractor Limited Access now displayed something entirely different. Clearance level, Omega Black. Classification, Maximum Secret. Access, Unrestricted. Morrison stared at the screen for a long moment, then looked at Elena with new eyes. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to wait here while I contact my supervisor." Elena nodded calmly, though she was mentally cataloging exit routes and calculating response times. She had positioned herself so that the hangar's security cameras would have a clear view of her face, a calculated decision that would either protect her or expose her, depending on who was watching. The supervisor who arrived 15 minutes later was not the duty officer Elena had expected. General Marcus Hale, base commander, approached with the measured stride of a man who had commanded respect for 30 years and wasn't about to stop now. "Ms. Voss," he said, his voice carrying the weight of unasked questions, "perhaps you'd join me in my office?" Hale's office was Spartanly functional, with maps of the region covering one wall, and a desk that looked like it had seen service in 3 different decades. Elena sat in the chair across from him, her posture relaxed but alert. "Omega Black,"
Hale said without preamble. "In 30 years of service, I've never seen that clearance level. According to my security manual, it doesn't exist." "According to your security manual, it doesn't," Elena agreed. "But it does exist. I wouldn't know, General. I process shipping manifests." Hale leaned back in his chair, studying her with the eye of a man who had learned to read people under pressure. "Your computer system says you have access to every classified facility on this base. It also says I don't have the clearance to ask you why." "That sounds like a computer problem, sir." "Miss Voss, this base is facing a security threat, equipment failures that look like sabotage, supply lines being compromised. If you're here in some official capacity, I'm here to process shipping manifests. Unless I'm being detained, I'd like to get back to work." Before Hale could respond, his desk phone rang with the sharp trill of an emergency line. He grabbed it on the second ring. "Hale." "What? When?" "I'll be right there." He hung up and looked at Elena with an expression that was equal parts frustration and calculation. "There's been an explosion in the motor pool. No casualties, but significant equipment damage." Elena was already standing. "May I go, General?" "You may. But this conversation isn't over." As Elena reached the door, she heard him speaking into his secure phone. "I need everything you can find on Omega Black clearance. No, I don't care what it takes." From the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of Captain Eric Lonsdale lingering near the general's outer office, close enough to have overheard more than he should have. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Elena saw the calculating look of a man who sensed opportunity. She walked out into the afternoon sun, knowing that her 8 months of careful anonymity had just come to an end. The acrid smell of burning electronics hit Elena before she reached the motor pool. Black smoke billowed from Bay 2, where soldiers were already unrolling fire hoses and shouting orders. Through the chaos, she could see the twisted remains of what had been a fuel pump assembly, twisted metal and scattered components that spoke of an explosion contained but not prevented. Sergeant Moreno appeared at Elena's elbow, her face grim. "Refueling pump blew while Martinez was doing routine maintenance. He's lucky he was checking the pressure gauge on the other side of the bay." Elena approached the wreckage with the same calm she brought to everything else, but her eyes were working differently now. Not cataloging inventory or tracking manifests, but analyzing blast patterns and component failure modes. The explosion had been precise, contained to the pump housing itself, too precise for an accident. "Has anyone called the ordnance disposal team?" she asked. "They're en route. Why?" Instead of answering, Elena knelt beside a piece of twisted metal that had been part of the pump's control circuit. The wiring harness was intact enough to show her what she needed to see. A small device, no bigger than a matchbox, tucked between the main power relay and the safety shutoff. She recognized the design immediately. A delayed secondary charge, probably set to detonate when the fire department arrived. "Sergeant Moreno," Elena said quietly, "I need you to evacuate everyone from this bay, right now." "What? Why?" "Because this wasn't an accident, and it's not over." Something in Elena's voice cut through Moreno's skepticism. The sergeant turned and began bellowing orders, her voice carrying the authority of someone who expected immediate obedience. "Everyone out! Clear the bay! Move, move, move!" Elena waited until the last soldier had cleared the doorway before approaching the secondary device. Her hands moved with surgical precision, disconnecting wires in a sequence that would have been meaningless to most people but was as familiar to her as breathing. The device's timer showed 47 seconds remaining when she extracted its power source. Moreno watched from the doorway as Elena calmly dismantled what could have been a much larger explosion. "Where the hell did you learn to do that?" "YouTube," Elena said, slipping the disabled device into her pocket. "Very educational." From across the compound, Captain Lonsdale lowered his camera phone, having captured several clear photos of Elena at work. His expression was thoughtful as he reviewed the images, particularly the one showing her handling the secondary device with the confidence of a professional. General Hale arrived as the fire team was declaring the scene secure. He took one look at the control damage, then at Elena, and asked the question she had been dreading. Miss Voss, in your professional opinion, was this sabotage? Elena met his gaze steadily. In my professional opinion, General, someone wanted this to look like an equipment failure. They also wanted the secondary explosion to happen when this bay was full of emergency responders. And how would you know that? Because whoever built that secondary device taught me the same technique 8 years ago. The supply depot was quiet at 2300 hours, illuminated only by security lights and the glow of Elena's laptop screen. She had requisitioned a corner desk under the pretense of catching up on inventory reconciliation, but her real work had nothing to do with shipping manifests. She was mapping patterns. The motor pool explosion was the third equipment failure in 6 weeks. Before that, there had been a communications array that mysteriously lost its primary antenna and a generator that had developed a catastrophic oil leak just before a major training exercise. Each incident had been written off as routine mechanical failure, but Elena could see the signature underneath the randomness. Precise placement, delayed activation, maximum disruption with minimal immediate casualties. It was the methodology of Unit Null, the black budget engineering unit that had officially never existed. More specifically, it was the methodology of Jacob Ghost Reeves, the unit's demolition specialist who had vanished 3 years ago along with enough classified technical data to compromise a dozen ongoing operations. Working late again, Voss? Elena looked up to find Sergeant Moreno approaching with 2 cups of coffee. The gesture was unexpected. In 8 months, Moreno had shown no interest in Elena beyond professional necessity. Inventory reconciliation, Elena said, accepting the coffee. Thrilling work. Moreno pulled up a chair. Cut the crap. That thing you did today, disabling that bomb, that wasn't something you learned from a technical manual. Elena sipped her coffee and considered her options. She could deflect, as she had been doing for 8 years. She could maintain the fiction that she was just another contractor who happened to be good with electronics, or she could trust someone who had just proven they were willing to trust her. I used to work with explosives, she said finally. Different job, different life. Military? Something like that. Moreno nodded slowly. And you think whoever's been causing our equipment failures, you think you know who it is? I think I know the methodology. The person using it might be someone I used to work with. Someone who went bad. Elena's smile was bitter. Someone who went freelance. In our line of work, there wasn't always a difference. Before Moreno could ask another question, Private Cross appeared in the depot doorway, looking around nervously before approaching their table. Elena? Miss Voss, I think I might have something you'd want to know about. What is it, Devon? That weird shipment I mentioned, the one that went to Hangar 7, I was talking to Jenkins in receiving, and he said it wasn't the only one. 3 weeks ago, there was another delivery. Same deal. No paperwork, priority authorization, straight to secure storage. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. What kind of delivery? Jenkins said it looked like drone parts, military-grade stuff, but not anything in our current inventory. And here's the weird part. Nobody signed for it. The delivery authorization was electronic, routed through some automated system. Elena and Moreno exchanged glances. A delivery system that bypassed human oversight was exactly the kind of vulnerability that Ghost Wrench would exploit. Devon, Elena said carefully, do you know which storage bay those parts went to? Bay 12, I think. Why? No reason. Thanks for the information. As Cross wandered away, Moreno leaned closer. You're thinking about taking a look at that storage bay, aren't you? I'm thinking about a lot of things. Well, if you're thinking about breaking into a secure storage facility, you're going to need someone who knows the patrol schedules. Elena looked at her with surprise. Sergeant, I wouldn't want to compromise your position. My position is keeping this base operational and my soldiers alive. If you think there's a threat, then we deal with it, officially or otherwise. Storage Bay 12 was located in the older section of the base, where the buildings were concrete block construction left over from the Soviet era. At 02:45 hours, the area was patrolled by a single guard who followed a predictable route every 30 minutes. Elena and Moreno approached from the blind spot Moreno had identified, moving with the careful coordination of people who understood the value of silence. The bay's lock was electronic, but it was also military standard, which meant it had a mechanical backup that Elena could defeat with tools from her contractor kit. "Remind me to recommend better security protocols," Moreno muttered as Elena worked on the lock. "Remind me to recommend not keeping sensitive materials in buildings built during the Eisenhower administration," Elena replied. The lock clicked open, and they slipped inside. Elena's flashlight beam swept across rows of metal shelving, most of it empty except for the occasional forgotten piece of equipment. But in the far corner, she found what Devon had described: shipping crates marked with manufacturing codes she recognized. "These are drone components," Elena said, prying open the nearest crate. "But they've been modified." The parts inside should have been standard reconnaissance equipment: cameras, communications arrays, navigation systems. Instead, Elena found components that had been rewired and retrofitted for purposes that had nothing to do with intelligence gathering. "What kind of modifications?" Moreno asked. Elena held up a device that looked like a standard electronics package but had been fitted with additional circuitry. "This is a frequency jammer, military grade but modified to target our specific communication protocols. So whoever's doing this has intimate knowledge of our systems and access to our technical specifications." Elena moved to the next crate. "This one's worse." The second crate contained what appeared to be explosive charges, but Elena could see they had been designed for specific applications. Small, precisely shaped devices meant to target critical infrastructure points. "We need to get out of here, now." But as she spoke, the bay's lights suddenly cut out, plunging them into darkness. Elena's flashlight beam caught the glimpse of movement near the rear exit, a figure in dark clothing who had been watching them from the shadows. "Security," Moreno shouted into her radio. "Bay 12, we have—" Her transmission cut to static. Elena grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the main entrance, but they could hear footsteps running away through the rear of the building. "Comms are jammed," Moreno said, checking her radio. "How did they know we were here?" Elena was examining the floor where the figure had been standing. In the beam of her flashlight, she could see footprints in the dust and something else: a small tool dropped in the haste to escape. She picked it up and felt her blood run cold. It was a precision electronics probe, custom-made with a distinctive grip design. She had seen dozens exactly like it because Unit Null had commissioned them from a specialized manufacturer. Ghost Wrench had been here, and now he knew they were hunting him.
Elena found Captain Lonsdale waiting by her desk when she arrived at the depot the next morning. He was leafing through a folder with the casual confidence of someone who believed he held all the cards. "Miss Voss," he said without looking up. "Or should I say Elena Vasquez? Elena Petrov? You've used quite a few names over the years." Elena set down her coffee and regarded him with the same expression she might use for a mildly interesting insect. "Captain Lonsdale, something I can help you with?" "I think the question is what I can help you with." He closed the folder and smiled the kind of smile that preceded bad news. "I've been doing some research on Omega Black clearances. Fascinating reading, what little I could find. It seems that particular classification is reserved for personnel whose very existence is considered a national security asset." "Sounds classified?" "It is. Which makes your presence here very interesting." Lonsdale opened the folder again, revealing printouts of the photos he had taken during the motor pool incident. "These pictures show you handling what appears to be an explosive device with remarkable expertise, the kind of expertise that takes years of training to develop." Elena glanced at the photos without reaction. "Photography is a nice hobby, Captain."
I've also been asking questions about equipment failures on this base. 3 incidents in 6 weeks, all of them showing signs of deliberate sabotage. And you, the mysterious contractor with the impossible clearance level, seem to know exactly what to look for. Your point? My point is that you're either here to stop the sabotage or you're here to cause it. Either way, your real identity is worth knowing. Lonsdale leaned forward. I'm prepared to file a formal request for your background investigation, unless, of course, you'd prefer to share that information voluntarily. Elena was quiet for a long moment, studying Lonsdale with the same careful attention she had given the modified drone components. When she finally spoke, her voice was conversational. "Captain, tell me about Operation Sandbridge." Lonsdale's confident expression flickered. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Syria, 2019. Intelligence operation gone wrong. 3 assets compromised, 2 killed." Elena's tone remained perfectly calm. "You were the case officer who approved the communication protocol that got them killed. That's classified. So is the fact that you filed a report blaming the failure on equipment malfunction instead of admitting that you had used an outdated encryption key." Elena tilted her head slightly. "Interesting that you'd bring up the subject of formal investigations, Captain." Lonsdale's face had gone pale. "How do you know about that?" "The same way I know about the Swiss bank account you opened 3 months after the operation. The same way I know that your security clearance review is coming up next month." Elena picked up her coffee. "The question is, do you really want to start a game where we compare classified information?" For a moment, Lonsdale looked like he might continue the confrontation. Then something in Elena's eyes, a complete lack of concern as though she were discussing the weather, made him reconsider. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "I want you to forget about photographing classified operations. I want you to forget about filing reports on personnel whose clearance levels exceed your own. And I want you to remember that some games have consequences you're not prepared for." Lonsdale gathered his folder and stood up. "This isn't over." "Captain," Elena said as he reached the door. "It never started." As Lonsdale left, Elena's radio crackled with an emergency alert. She could hear sirens in the distance, and through the depot windows, she could see black smoke rising from the direction of the fuel storage facility. The sabotage was escalating. She grabbed her toolkit and headed for the door, knowing that Ghost Wrench had just raised the stakes considerably. The fuel depot was a sprawling complex of underground tanks and surface pipelines that supplied the entire base. Elena arrived to find organized chaos. Fire trucks deploying foam systems, soldiers evacuating nearby buildings, and officers shouting orders over the roar of flames that had already consumed the main pumping station. "Voss," General Hale spotted her through the smoke and jogged over, his uniform already streaked with soot. "Thank God, we've got a situation that's about to become a catastrophe." Elena assessed the scene with the rapid calculation that had become second nature. The fire was centered on Pump Station Alpha, but the real danger lay 30 meters away, where a secondary pipeline connected to the underground storage tanks. If the flames reached that junction, the resulting explosion would crater half the base. "Where's your emergency shutoff?" "That's the problem. The main shutoff valve is located in the pump house basement. The structure's compromised, and we can't get anyone close enough to reach it." Elena studied the burning building, noting the pattern of structural damage. The explosion had been carefully placed to block access to the emergency controls while ensuring maximum air spread to the fuel lines. Classic Ghost Wrench methodology: create a crisis that would overwhelm any response team. "I need 3 volunteers," she said, "and about 90 seconds to explain what we're going to do." Sergeant Moreno stepped forward without hesitation. "I'm in." Private Martinez nodded grimly. "Me too." To Elena's surprise, Private Cross raised his hand. "I know where the valve housing is. I helped install the backup system last month." Elena looked at the young soldier with new respect. Devon, this isn't inventory management. If we mess this up... If we don't try, everybody dies anyway, Cross interrupted. I'm in. Elena quickly outlined her plan. The pump house basement was accessible through a maintenance tunnel that ran beneath the motor pool. If they could reach the tunnel entrance and navigate the underground maze, they could approach the shutoff valve from below, avoiding the worst of the fire damage. The tunnel system wasn't designed for emergency access, Moreno pointed out. It's going to be tight, dark, and probably filling with smoke. The alternative is a fuel-air explosion that'll be visible from orbit. Everyone clear on the plan? They moved out in single file, Elena leading the way with a flashlight and her contractor's knowledge of the base infrastructure. The maintenance tunnel was exactly as cramped and uncomfortable as Moreno had predicted, but Elena navigated the turns with the confidence of someone who had memorized the base schematics during her first week on the job. The tunnel brought them up inside the pump house foundation, where they could hear the fire raging overhead. The emergency valve was located behind a steel access panel that should have been locked, but had been deliberately damaged, another ghost wrench signature. The valve's been tampered with, Elena said, examining the mechanism by flashlight. Someone welded the hand wheel in place. Can you fix it? Cross asked. Elena was already pulling tools from her kit. I can fix it, but I need you three to get back to the tunnel entrance and wait for my signal. When this valve closes, the pressure differential is going to cause some interesting mechanical failures. We're not leaving you here, Moreno said flatly. Sergeant, that's an order from someone with higher clearance than you've ever seen. Go, now. For a moment, Elena thought Moreno might argue. Then the sergeant nodded grimly and led Cross and Martinez back toward the tunnel entrance. Alone in the basement, Elena went to work on the valve mechanism. The welding job was professional, but hasty. Ghost Wrench had been in a hurry, which meant he had made small mistakes. She used a combination of heat from a cutting torch and leverage from a pry bar to break the welds, her movements precise despite the growing heat and smoke. Above her, she could hear the fire spreading, consuming the pump house structure. She had maybe 5 minutes before the building became completely unstable. The valve wheel finally broke free. Elena threw her full weight against it, feeling the massive mechanism respond as thousands of gallons of fuel stopped flowing toward the flames. The pressure drop would cut off the fuel source, but it would also cause a series of pressure waves throughout the system. The first wave hit as she was climbing back toward the tunnel entrance. The entire pump house shuddered, and Elena heard the distinctive groan of structural steel giving way. She made it to the tunnel just as the building's roof collapsed, sending a shower of sparks and debris down the access shaft. She emerged from the tunnel to find the fire crews already gaining control of the blaze. Without its fuel source, the fire was burning itself out, leaving behind twisted metal and scorched concrete, but no catastrophic explosion. Voss! Hale grabbed her arm as she climbed out of the tunnel. Is it over? The immediate crisis is over, Elena said, pulling off her work gloves. But whoever did this isn't finished. As she spoke, she scanned the crowd of soldiers and base personnel who had gathered to watch the fire. In the shifting shadows cast by the emergency lights, she spotted a familiar figure standing apart from the others, a man in maintenance coveralls who was watching the scene with professional interest rather than concern. Jacob Ghost Reeves looked exactly as she remembered him. Medium height, unremarkable features, the kind of face that would disappear in any crowd. But Elena knew the way he held himself, the way his eyes cataloged details and escape routes. Their gazes met across 50 meters of smoke and chaos. Ghost smiled, not the friendly expression of a base employee, but the cold acknowledgement of one professional recognizing another. Then he turned and melted into the crowd, disappearing as if he had never been there. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Ghost Wrench was done playing games. The next attack would be his final move.
Spread to the fuel lines. Classic Ghost Wrench methodology. Create a crisis that would overwhelm any response team. I need 3 volunteers, she said, and about 90 seconds to explain what we're going to do. Sergeant Moreno stepped forward without hesitation. I'm in. Private Martinez nodded grimly. Me too.
To Elena's surprise, Private Cross raised his hand. "I know where the valve housing is. I helped install the backup system last month." Elena looked at the young soldier with new respect. "Devon, this isn't inventory management. If we mess this up, if we don't try, everybody dies anyway," Cross interrupted. "I'm in." Elena quickly outlined her plan. The pump house basement was accessible through a maintenance tunnel that ran beneath the motor pool. If they could reach the tunnel entrance and navigate the underground maze, they could approach the shutoff valve from below, avoiding the worst of the fire damage. The tunnel system wasn't designed for emergency access, Sergeant Moreno pointed out. "It's going to be tight, dark, and probably filling with smoke." "The alternative is a fuel-air explosion that'll be visible from orbit," Elena replied. "Everyone clear on the plan?" They moved out in single file, Elena leading the way with a flashlight and her contractor's knowledge of the base infrastructure. The maintenance tunnel was exactly as cramped and uncomfortable as Moreno had predicted, but Elena navigated the turns with the confidence of someone who had memorized the base schematics during her first week on the job. The tunnel brought them up inside the pump house foundation, where they could hear the fire raging overhead. The emergency valve was located behind a steel access panel that should have been locked, but had been deliberately damaged, another ghost wrench signature. "The valve's been tampered with," Elena said, examining the mechanism by flashlight. "Someone welded the hand wheel in place." "Can you fix it?" Cross asks. "I can fix it, but I need you three to get back to the tunnel entrance and wait for my signal. When this valve closes, the pressure differential's going to cause some interesting mechanical failures." "We're not leaving you here," Moreno said flatly. "Sergeant, that's an order from someone with higher clearance than you've ever seen. Go, now." For a moment, Elena thought Moreno might argue. Then the sergeant nodded grimly and led Cross and Martinez back toward the tunnel entrance. Alone in the basement, Elena went to work on the valve mechanism. The welding job was professional, but hasty. Ghost Wrench had been in a hurry, which meant he had made small mistakes. She used a combination of heat from a cutting torch and leverage from a pry bar to break the welds, her movements precise, despite the growing heat and smoke. Above her, she could hear the fire spreading, consuming the pump house structure. She had maybe 5 minutes before the building became completely unstable. The valve wheel finally broke free. Elena threw her full weight against it, feeling the massive mechanism respond as thousands of gallons of fuel stopped flowing toward the flames. The pressure drop would cut off the fire's fuel source, but it would also cause a series of pressure waves throughout the system. The first wave hit as she was climbing back toward the tunnel entrance. The entire pump house shuddered, and Elena heard the distinctive groan of structural steel giving way. She made it to the tunnel just as the building's roof collapsed, sending a shower of sparks and debris down the access shaft. She emerged from the tunnel to find the fire crews already gaining control of the blaze. Without its fuel source, the fire was burning itself out, leaving behind twisted metal and scorched concrete, but no catastrophic explosion. "Voss!" Hale grabbed her arm as she climbed out of the tunnel. "Is it over?" "The immediate crisis is over," Elena said, pulling off her work gloves. "But whoever did this isn't finished." As she spoke, she scanned the crowd of soldiers and base personnel who had gathered to watch the fire. In the shifting shadows cast by the emergency lights, she spotted a familiar figure standing apart from the others, a man in maintenance coveralls who was watching the scene with professional interest rather than concern. Jacob Ghost Reeves looked exactly as she remembered him. Medium height, unremarkable features, the kind of face that would disappear in any crowd. But Elena knew the way he held himself, the way his eyes cataloged details and escape routes. Their gazes met across 50 meters of smoke and chaos. Ghost smiled, not the friendly expression of a base employee, but the cold acknowledgement of one professional recognizing another. Then he turned and melted into the crowd, disappearing as thoroughly as if he had never been there. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Ghost Wrench was done playing games. The next attack would be his final move.
Elena felt a familiar weight in her chest, the same doubt that had driven her to disappear 8 years ago. I still question orders, Jacob, but these people aren't faceless bureaucrats. They're soldiers trying to do their jobs. They don't deserve to die because someone's paying you to prove a point? They don't deserve to die, Ghost agreed, but they're going to anyway unless I complete this contract. You think this is about ideology? This is about survival, Elena. Mine specifically. Before Elena could respond, the equipment room door burst open. Private Cross stumbled in, looking around frantically. Elena, I saw someone on the roof and thought... Oh. Cross stopped as he spotted Ghost Wrench. Hi? Ghost's expression shifted from professional calm to irritation. Seriously? Devon, Elena said, without taking her eyes off Ghost, you need to leave. Right now. But Cross, with the impeccable timing that had made him both useful and exasperating, tripped over a power cable and knocked over a rack of equipment. The crash echoed through the building like a thunderclap. So much for subtle, Ghost muttered. He grabbed a small device from his toolkit. Elena recognized it as a communications jammer and activated it just as Marino's voice crackled over the building's intercom system. Building 6, this is Sergeant Moreno. I'm seeing unauthorized access, requesting immediate backup. Ghost looked at Elena with something that might have been regret. You always were too decent for this work, Elena. I'm sorry it has to end this way. He pulled what looked like a standard smoke grenade from his belt, but Elena knew it would be something more sophisticated, probably a flashbang designed to disorient anyone in the room while he escaped through one of his prepared routes. She moved before he could activate the device, closing the distance between them with the kind of speed that came from muscle memory older than conscious thought. Ghost was fast, but Elena had spent 8 years staying in shape while he had spent 8 years getting comfortable. The fight was brief and efficient. Ghost was skilled, but Elena had the advantage of knowing exactly how he thought, how he moved, what techniques he favored. When Moreno burst into the equipment room 30 seconds later, she found Ghost Wrench on the floor, with Elena sitting calmly beside him, his own zip-tie restraints securing his hands. Well, Moreno said, looking around the room, that was easier than expected. Cross was picking himself up from the floor, looking dazed but pleased. Did I help? Elena looked at him with something approaching affection. Devon, you were perfect. The debriefing took place in General Hale's office at 0600 hours, with Elena, Moreno, and Captain Lonsdale seated around the conference table. Ghost Wrench was already in military custody, awaiting transport to a facility that Elena suspected didn't appear on any official maps. Jacob Reeves, Hale read from the file that had materialized overnight. Former Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, officially died in a training accident in 2019, but apparently got better. Unit Null specialized in people who were officially dead, Elena said. It made certain types of operations easier to authorize. And you were part of this unit. I was the technical lead, specialized in building things that couldn't be traced back to their source. Electronics, primarily. Communications equipment, surveillance devices, occasionally more exotic hardware. Lonsdale leaned forward. What kind of more exotic hardware? Elena looked at him with the same expression she might use for a persistent fly. The kind you don't have clearance to know about, Captain. Hale held up a hand before Lonsdale could respond. What I want to know is what comes next. According to my orders from Brussels, your presence here was never official, but given what you've done, what I've done is my job. General. Nothing more.
Your job was processing shipping manifests. My job has always been keeping critical operations functional. For the last 8 years, that's meant staying invisible. It still does. Hale studied her for a long moment. I could request that your clearance be reactivated. Full reinstatement, official position, proper recognition for what you've accomplished. I don't want recognition, General. I want to go back to processing shipping manifests. Why? Moreno asked. You could have any position you wanted, any assignment, any base. Why choose to stay invisible? Elena was quiet for a moment, looking out the office window at the base where soldiers were already returning to their normal routines. The fuel deposit was being rebuilt. The communications array was functioning perfectly. Within a week, most people would forget there had ever been a crisis. Because, she said finally, the work that matters most is the work nobody sees. Unit Null taught me that the most dangerous problems are the ones nobody knows exist until it's too late. Staying visible means staying limited to official channels, official responses, official solutions.
And staying invisible means you can act when official solutions aren't enough, Hale said. Exactly. Hale nodded slowly. What are your conditions? This conversation never happened. My involvement in stopping the sabotage goes into whatever classified file system makes things disappear, and I go back to being Elena Voss, civilian contractor, GS-12 equivalent pay grade. And if something like this happens again? Elena's smile was barely visible. Then you'll have a very competent contractor on staff who notices things other people miss. Lonsdale cleared his throat. General, I should point out that having an unofficial operative on the base creates certain legal and operational complications. Captain, Hale interrupted, you're dismissed. After Lonsdale left, Hale turned back to Elena. He could still cause problems. Captain Lonsdale and I have an understanding. He's smart enough to know that some secrets are more dangerous to reveal than to keep. Moreno shook her head. I still don't understand why you want to stay invisible. After what you did, you could write your own ticket. Sergeant, what's the most important job on this base? Moreno considered the question. Keeping the soldiers fed, equipped, and mission-ready? And who does that work? Supply clerks, mechanics, cooks, medics? Moreno's voice trailed off as she understood. The people nobody notices. The people who keep everything running while the officers make speeches and the heroes get medals. Those are the people who actually matter. 3 hours later, Elena was back at her desk in the supply depot, reviewing shipping manifests and processing requisition forms. To anyone watching, she looked exactly the same as she had 2 weeks ago. A quiet contractor doing unglamorous work with competent efficiency. But Moreno, passing by with a clipboard of her own, caught Elena's eye and nodded slightly. The nod of one professional acknowledging another. Private Cross approached with his usual enthusiasm, carrying a stack of delivery confirmations that needed Elena's signature. Hey, Elena. Ms. Voss. I just wanted to say thanks for, everything. I don't know what you're talking about, Devin. I process shipping manifests. Cross grinned. Right, shipping manifests. Very important work. The most important work is usually invisible, Elena said, taking the papers from him. Remember that. As Cross walked away, Elena returned her attention to the manifest on her screen, a shipment of replacement parts from Germany scheduled to arrive Thursday. Standard requisition, proper authorization, nothing unusual. She made a mental note to verify the shipping containers personally when they arrived. Some habits, she had learned, were worth keeping. In the distance, she could see General Hale through his office window, back to the routine business of running a military base. She suspected he would sleep better knowing that somewhere in his vast operation, someone was watching for the problems that weren't supposed to exist. Elena smiled and went back to her work. Invisible, unnoticed, and exactly where she belonged.
Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.